Hello everyone, my name is Devji. I'm going to be teaching you SAT English 1, SAT 1 English. Today we will be doing a passage on reading where we will be tested upon a lot of topics such as point of view, questions relating to phrases and context, evidence questions, comparing and contrasting, and summarizing and various other topics. So let us proceed first. This passage is adapted from Introductory Remarks in the Interpretation of Dreams by Sigmund Freud. So this is a passage written by an author named Sigmund Freud from the book Interpretation of Dreams. This is the introductory passage. So probably you will find various mentions of what further work he will do in the book that he has published. Let us begin. In attempting to discuss the interpretation of dreams, I do not believe that I have overstepped the bounds of neuropathological interest. For when investigated psychologically, the dream proves to be the first link in a chain of abnormal psychic structures, whose other links, the hysterical phobia, the obsession, and the delusion, must interest the physician for practical reasons. The dream can lay no claim to a corresponding practical significance. However, its theoretical value is very great. And one who cannot explain the origin of content of dreams will strive in vain to understand phobias, obsessive and delusional ideas, and likewise their therapeutic importance. So from the first paragraph, we learn that the author wants to emphasize on the fact that even though dreams may not be actually related to any treatment of any psychological problems that a person may have, it is the core basis of understanding what the treatment should be to solve that psychological problem. The author mentions problems such as hysterical phobia, obsession, and delusion. So he tells these are practical problems which interest physicians. But what physicians don't understand is these practical problems are originated from how a person dreams. So he wants to interpret the origin source, the theoretical portion that leads to this problem. He tells us the people who do not try to understand dreams and the source of any psychological problem will try in vain to treat that patient, meaning he will try unsuccessfully to treat that particular patient. While this relationship makes our subject important, it is responsible also for the deficiencies in this work. The surfaces of fracture, which will be frequently discussed, correspond to many points of contacts where the problem of dream formation informs more comprehensive problems of psychopathology which cannot be discussed here. These larger issues will be elaborated upon in the future. So as I said before I began this passage, he is telling that certain components of his discussion cannot be discussed presently in these introductory remarks. It is discussed later on in detail in the book that he is writing, the book for which this is an introduction. In this he tells sometimes while this relationship makes our subject important. So he tells while it is important, the subject is very important for the solution of the psychological problem because it is the subject individual who dreams individually different. So that is what makes the subject different. But he tells while this is makes the subject unique, it also results in some drawbacks in the work. So why are there drawbacks? He tells the surfaces of fracture, which will be frequently discussed, corresponds to many points of contact where the problems of dream formation informs more comprehensive problems. So he tells there are many problems that are related to your dreams. So a subject's psychological problem, it is very hard to identify maybe which exact dream is resulting in the present psychological problems. But he tells there are many links to many problems in human life that are related to that person's dreams. Okay, and he tells he will be discussing this further on in the book that he has written. We shall continue to the next paragraph. Peculiarities in the material I have used to elucidate the interpretation of dreams have rendered this publication difficult. So peculiarities meaning inconsistencies in the material that the author has received To elucidate the interpretation, elucidate means extract or take out the meaning of the dreams, have rendered this publication difficult, have made writing this book quite difficult because his source material was not consistent. The work itself will demonstrate why all dreams related in scientific literature or collected by others have to remain useless for my purpose. So he tells he will prove or he will show you why any literature based on the study of dreams done so far by man is useless for his particular experiment. He will tell us later on as we read his book. In choosing my examples, I had to limit myself to considering my own dreams and those of my patients who were under psychoanalytic treatment. So he tells since he could not use the previously collected data, scientific data, he had to get new data to perform his study. So what did he do? He started studying his own dreams as well as the dreams of certain patients that he had, whom he was treating, the patients who were under psychoanalytic treatment. I was restrained from using material derived from my patient's dream by the fact that during their treatment, the dream process was subjected to an undesirable complication, the intermixture of neurotic characters. So he tells now he had one source, that was himself and his patient. But he tells even the data that he collected from his patients could not be used because they had become inconsistent. Why? Because there was an intermixture of neurotic characters. So remember, his data was from patients. So they aren't generally people who are in the right state of mind. So while trying to study their dream also, there had been certain difficulties. So from here we know that basically he had to study his own dreams. On the other hand, in discussing my own dreams, I was obliged to expose more of my intimacies of my psychic life than I should like, more so than generally falls to the task of an author who is not a poet but an investigator of nature. This was painful but unavoidable. I had to put up with the inevitable in order to demonstrate the truth of my psychological results at all. To be sure, I disguised some of my indiscretions through omissions and substitutions, though I felt that these detract from the value of the examples in which they appear. I can only express that the reader of this work, putting himself in my difficult position, will show patience, and also that anyone inclined to take offense at any of the reported dreams will concede freedom of thought at least to the dream. So, the author ends off this introductory remarks by saying that he was obliged to expose his dreams. Now, reading these lines 44 through 46, we understand that author is kind of an introverted person because he tells I was obliged to expose more of my intimacies of my psychic life than I should like. So he didn't want to exactly expose all his thoughts to the world. But he had no choice as he was the only patient for his study. More so than generally falls to the task of an author who is not a poet but an investigator of nature. So he tells he is not a literary author or a poet who talks about his emotions, his feelings and what is inside him. He is a scientist. So he investigates. So the fact that he had to expose his intimate thoughts, his deep, dark thoughts that he had to study himself and to study his dreams basically and to interpret them, he doesn't like that and it goes against his nature as a scientist. This was painful but unavoidable. He tells he tried to avoid this, exposing his own psychic intimacies, but it was unavoidable and at the end he had to put up with the inevitable. So to make sure that his study had consistent data, proper data, and to prove what he wanted to prove via his research, he had to expose all his intimacies which he had within him. All the secrets or maybe all the thought processes that make him who he is, he had to expose that to prove his study. To be sure, I disguised some of my indiscretions for omissions and substitutions, though I feel that these detract from the value of the examples in which they appear. So he is telling in this line, he tells us that there are certain portions in this study where he may have been too shy or ashamed or anything to write about it with the correct names. So maybe he changed certain names in certain examples, in certain while interpreting his dreams. Maybe he didn't want people to know who he was thinking about, so he just changed the name of the person. Maybe some occasions he omitted the name entirely, meaning he didn't even include that person, or he didn't include that aspect of the dream in his study. So, though I feel that these detract from the value of the examples in which they appear, even though they may have added value to his research on that particular dream, he still has not included them. This shows us that he is quite introverted, because he knew he was the only person whose dreams he was studying. He was the only basis for his entire research, and yet certain points, even though it would be beneficial, he chose to omit these mistakes. That shows us basic difference between an author or a poet and basically a man of science. I can only express the hope that the reader of this work, putting himself in my difficult position, will show patience, and also that anyone inclined to take offense at any of the reported dreams will consider freedom of thought, at least in the dream life. So he tells that he hopes that people understand the point of view from which he is talking about, or a point of view with which he is approaching his study, and to respect the dreams that he had. Okay, the dreams that he interpreted to perform his study. Why? He tells that everybody has freedom of thought, so we can all dream what we want. Okay, but conditions in that period were very different, so you couldn't speak your mind out openly everywhere. So he says, at least let me dream of what I want to dream. At least concede freedom of thought to the dream life. So don't tell me how I should dream, or don't judge me on the basis of my dreams. Just let it be. Consider it freedom of thought. So this is a very interesting passage. It's an introductory remark. So basically it's an introduction to a book, and it tells us about the difficulties that the author had in getting source material. He tells us the importance of the dreams, the difficulties of the source material, how he got the source material, and since it was his own dreams and he was sort of an introverted person, he wanted to not be judged by everyone, because maybe his dreams were not what you and I would call normal. Maybe they were extreme, we do not know. So now we will move on to the questions and answers related to this passage. I will take you to a slideshow of the questions, and then we will look into the passage and figure out the answers. So question 1. Okay. The author can be most accurately described as. Okay. So there are 4 options. Furious and insultive, defensive and meticulous, imploring and desperate, unreliable and suspicious. So before I start off explaining the answer, I want to explain to you what type of question this is. So this is what we call a point of view question. What is a point of view question? A question which tests how you look at the passage, or how you perceive somebody else or a character in the passage looks at something else. A personal point of view from that person's perspective. So from your perspective, in this case, the question is, how do you describe the author? So I've told you, he is very introverted. He is asking you to not judge him on his dreams. So what does that show? That shows that he is quite defensive. He doesn't want to be judged outwardly. Okay? And meticulous. Why have we chosen option B, defensive and meticulous? Why meticulous? What does meticulous mean? Meticulous is someone who likes everything to be perfect. someone who wants to show great attention to detail. So we see in the passage that he will not take any data apart from the ones which are completely consistent, completely flawless. He could have taken any data to prove what he wanted through his research. The data, the literature that he had ignored, the literature that was done by scientists before, but he didn't. That shows he's meticulous. So out of these 4 options, furious and insulted, he was not furious and he was not insulted. Imploring and desperate. No, he is not desperately asking people to believe what he is saying. He is telling people not to judge his dreams. Unreliable and suspicious. No, he is not unreliable. He is completely reliable because he is not taking data which is inconsistent. And there is no suspicion regarding him. So be defensive and meticulous is your answer. Now question 2. The author discusses a topic that he plans to pursue in future work. In which sentence? So there are 4 choices here. So we have to find out in which of the choice provided that he mentions future work. Okay. Now this is a question related to the topic of text structure. So what do you mean by text structure? Exactly remembering how exactly the passage you have read is structured. What comes when and where it comes. Okay. So let us look at the options. So there are 4 options. In the first sentence of the passage, in the last sentence of the passage, in the second paragraph of the passage, in the first and last paragraphs of the passage. So first sentence, in attempting to discuss the interpretation of dreams, completely incorrect. He is not talking about future work. Second, in the last sentence of the passage. Last sentence is conceding freedom of thought at least to the dream. No, that is more of a defensive statement rather than something that he is talking about discussing in the future. In the second paragraph of the passage. So in the second paragraph we see here that he is discussing how dreams are related to various problems, but he goes on to say these cannot be discussed here in lines 22 to 24 when you read. You will see that he goes on to say that if these comprehensive problems cannot be discussed here, these larger issues will be elaborated upon in the future. Meaning, he will talk about these further problems in the future. So your correct answer for question 2 is in the second paragraph of the passage. See, when you are approaching questions, if you reach the right option, don't go to the next option. Be confident in how you are answering. Okay, question 3. According to the author, studying phobias, obsessions, and delusions is dash, but studying dreams is not. So this is a question that is checking how good you are at comparing and contrasting. Okay, this is a comparing and contrasting style of question. So he tells, the question is, according to the author, studying phobias, obsessions and delusions is dash, but studying dreams is not. So where did we read this? We read regarding this particular topic in the first passage, in the first paragraph. So he tells, look at line 10 or we will go on from line 4. For when investigated psychologically, the dream proves to be the first link of an abnormal psychic structure, whose other links must interest the physician for practical reasons. So he tells other links interest the physician for practical reasons. And what are these other links? Hysterical phobia, obsession and delusion. But the dream can lay no claim to a corresponding practical significance. So here he points out a direct contrast between something that is practical and something that is not practical. He tells us that the hysterical phobia, obsession and delusion are practical interests, practical problems that need to be solved by a physician. But a dream is not a practical problem. It is the theoretical source material for understanding the practical problem. So it is clear in this thing how he is comparing disorders to a dream. So from question 3. So out of the options available, practical, possible, useless, easy, the option A, practical, makes the most sense as we have seen in the passage. Okay. Now we will move on to the fourth question. When he uses the phrase the inevitable in lines 48 and 49, the author is referring to what? So let us go to line 48 and 49. Here, this pain was unavoidable, but I had to put up with the inevitable in order to demonstrate the truth of my psychological results at all. So to understand what exactly he means by the inevitable, you have to understand what is he talking about. It is, I had to put up with the inevitable. So before this sentence, we know he compares himself to a poet. He tells he is not a poet who will express everything that's within him. He is not accustomed like that. Then he goes on to say, but this was unavoidable and it was inevitable. The meaning of inevitable is something you cannot prevent. It is going to happen no matter what. So we understand from the question that he is talking about doing something that he didn't want to do but had to do. So what was that? Pretty obvious. It was his dream. He didn't get any data from any other patients. So he had to study his own dreams. Now let's look at the question. The options. The fact that he had to publish some of his own dreams, which made him uncomfortable. The idea that all dreams contain significant meaning. The gradual loss of detail in what one can remember about a dream. The discomfort that everyone feels when discussing dreams with other people. So, first I would like to discuss what type of question this is. This is a question that tests whether you understand a word or a phrase used in a particular context. Everyone may know the meaning of the word inevitable, but what is the word referring to? The context in which it is being used is what is being tested here. So, out of the options given, let us go through randomly the options. Let us go from down to up, from option D. The discomfort that everyone feels while discussing his dream? No. He's talking about the discomfort that he feels. So it is not everyone. Poets and authors, he says, are very comfortable expressing their feelings. Now, option C. Gradual loss of detail in what one can remember about a dream. No, he doesn't talk about forgetting anything at any point in his essay. We have described the author as a meticulous person, a person who is very detail oriented. So he will not lose. There won't be any loss of detail in what one can remember about a dream. He doesn't talk about that. The idea that all dreams contain significant meaning. No. He doesn't tell that every single dream has significant meaning. It is not mentioned anywhere. He tells dreams are the source material for understanding problems, but not each and every dream leads to us knowing how the problem is solved. He has never mentioned that all dreams contain significant meaning. So we are left with option E. The fact that he had to publish some of his own dreams which made him uncomfortable. This is the perfect option because he tells he wanted to avoid that, but he couldn't avoid it. So option A is your answer. We solve this question by a process of elimination. This is how, if you do not know or are not confident of what the correct answer is, you eliminate what you think is incorrect, and then whatever is remaining most probably is correct. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Question 5. The author could not rely upon the dreams related in scientific literature because. So, this question is again testing what? It is testing, again in a way, the text structure, but more importantly in this case, it is testing evidence and reasoning. So you have to find out some evidence in the passage that states why the author could not rely upon the dreams related in scientific literature and what is the reason. Okay, now let us look into the passage. So in this paragraph, in the third paragraph from lines 28 onwards, we see that the answer is presented here. Peculiarities in the material I have used to elucidate the interpretation of dreams have rendered this publication difficult. While explaining, I specifically explained this line in little length. So this line shows us that peculiarities in this context means inconsistencies. So inconsistencies in the materials that he has used to extract the interpretation of dreams have rendered this publication difficult. So we have got a clue. We have gone to the passage where this portion is and we know why it has been difficult. Okay. Now we have to find the correct option that shows what we are claiming, where exactly which option proves what we are claiming right now. The author couldn't, option A, the author couldn't be sure if material had been changed in or censored from them. Okay, that is a plausible thing because he did not know if the records were genuine. Maybe somebody mishandled the information and the data. Option B, the author needed to interview people himself in order to discuss the emotional reaction to their dreams. That is also one probable answer. It may be correct. Okay, but let me point it out to you. It is not mentioned in the passage. Right? Don't assume things. Okay, if it is not mentioned, probably it is not a correct option. Option C. No work of scientific literature had discussed dreams at the time the author began his study. This is absolutely incorrect. From where will he find the data inconsistent if nobody has studied what he studied? So basically somebody or other people had studied what he studied, but he doesn't trust the data that they got from their studies. Alright, so option C is completely incorrect. So we are still stuck between option A and let's look at option D, because B also I just told you it is not mentioned in the passage. So we will not look at that right now. Let's look at option D. The author does not give a reason for this in the passage, but says that the rest of his work will explain why this is the case. So I told you this is an introductory remark. Okay. So what do you think is the answer? In front of you is the answer slide. The answer is option B. The author does not give a reason for this in the passage, but says that the rest of his work explains why this is the case. Now, to make sure you know where exactly we got this answer from, let's look at the third paragraph. Second line. The work itself will demonstrate why all dreams related in scientific literature or collected by others had to remain useless for my purpose. He tells his work will show why all the data that he has collected was useless for his research on this subject. So what does it mean my work will show? It means he will produce in further sessions the proof regarding why he could not use this literature. Alright? So we are done with question 5. Question 6. In the third paragraph, what does the author tell us about the omissions and substitutions he made when discussing his own dreams in the work that follow the passage? So he tells us, did I not? I think we have read and explained this part. He tells us, to be sure, in line 50, I hope you can see it on the screen. To be sure, I disguise some of my indiscretions through omissions and substitutions, though I feel that these detract from the value of the examples in which they appear. I can only express hope that the reader of this work, putting himself in my decision, will show patience. My difficult position will show patience. So from this we learn that he had made certain omissions and substitutions as stated in the question. Why did he make these omissions and substitutions is what the question paper is asking you. So first of all, before I discuss this answer, I would like to tell you what type of question exactly this is. This is a statement and implications question. Now, what exactly is the statements and implications question? It is another form of phrases in context. Meaning, it may say something else, but what does it actually mean? So, it may be a statement that may not exactly mean what it says on the surface, but may have other implications. Okay, I will give you an example to basically understand what type of question this is. So I will give you an example related to football. If I tell you that Messi and Ronaldo are the two best footballers on the planet, and Ronaldo is the second best. So what does that imply? It implies I am telling you Messi is the best. So that is the type of question this is, statements and implications. So let us look at the options. He is not responsible for these, his editors are. No. He himself tells, I have made omissions. He is conducting the study. It is not a book that he is writing. It is a research paper that basically he is submitting. So I don't think so. There is no mention of his editors also. So option A is completely incorrect. Option B. He feels that the adjusted examples would be more useful had they remained unadjusted. This is a very interesting option because yes, he does tell this. He tells, though in line 53, though I feel that these detract from the value of the examples in which they appear. So he tells, even though the certain names or certain substitutions or omissions that he has done may help explain his research better, he has chosen to omit it. Though I feel these detract from the value of the examples in which they appear. So he tells detract the value means decrease the value. So he tells if he would have not omitted or not substituted certain details of the example that he shows, some of the examples that he shows, maybe it would have proved his point in a more effective way. Yet he still did that. That shows us how defensive, how sort of introverted person the author is. Option B. Okay, option C. We still do not know which is the right answer. We are only just going through each and every option. I have eliminated option A. Option B remains. Let us look at the other two options. He was forced to make these or journals would not accept his work. No, there is no mention of journals. He is writing a research. So, he has not yet mentioned anything about a journal yet. He is talking about his work rather than the publication of his work. He is glad that he had the opportunity to reconsider his initial presentation of his works. No, and no place does he tell, I have written a paper unedited, but then I felt ashamed of certain things and I edited it. The correct answer is option B. He feels that the adjusted examples will be more useful had they remained unadjusted. That is exactly what he says after writing that he has omitted these examples, immediately after writing that. Okay, now let us move on to the next question, question 7. The author has written this passage in order to. So why? What is the purpose of writing this passage? Okay, so this is basically to make sure or to get a understanding of whether you've understood the theme of this passage. What exactly is this passage about? Not the purpose, sorry. What is it exactly it is about? The theme, the topic, the question that it raises. So here are your options. It proposes a psychological experiment. Option B, justify his work and address some of its limitations. Option C, to respond to a specific critic who has cast doubt on his work's reliability. Option D, teach the reader how to interpret his or her own dream. So, option A, propose a psychological experiment. So, he is not asking, or he is not talking about a new experimentation method. No, he is talking about his own research. You have to understand, you have to be very specific when you talk about this. Experimenting on something and research on something are two different things. Okay, mostly practical experiments, not studies. Experiments are conducted after a research paper is published to prove or to disprove what that person has said. So, yes, propose a psychological experiment, incorrect. Option B, justify his work and address some of its limitations. To a large extent, it is correct. He wants to make sure that everyone who is reading this passage or this book knows that his work is meticulous. He has not taken any inconsistent data. He has presented his study in the most accurate way possible. And he talks about certain limitations where he is told that he has deleted or omitted certain details. So he has talked what is given in point B is quite accurate about what the author has written this passage about. Respond to a specific critic. No, there is no specific person that he has mentioned here, not once. So we do not know. Maybe he was, but according to the passage provided to us, no. Teach the reader how to interpret his or her own dream. I don't think so. He wanted to he's not trying to teach the reader how to interpret his dreams. He is trying to show the reader or bring in front of the reader the fact that problems that arise psychologically are related to dreams. So you don't have to interpret your dreams yourself. He is talking about psychological problems being solved with the help of interpretation of the patient's dream, not every single individual. So I'll give you a second again. Try and figure out the answer. Question 7. So the answer for question 7 is option B. Justify his work and address some of its limitations. I hope I have explained sufficiently why that is. That should be the answer. He has justified his work by telling, he wants to justify his work by telling that his study is meticulously done, and he also tells certain problems like omissions that he had done to protect his privacy. Question 8. The author argues that understanding the content of dreams is necessary for what? So this is what you call a purpose question. What is the purpose of this study that he is doing? The theme which was in the previous question was, here is my study and this is what I am saying. This question is, why is he saying what he is saying? That is what you mean purpose. So you have 4 options here. So here you have to understand, the author argues that understanding the content of dreams. So it is kind of a purpose mixed with a point of view question. You have to understand why the author thinks that understanding dreams are necessary, not why you think or why anybody else thinks. The author. So there are 4 options. Comprehending the therapeutic importance of dreams, understanding delusional ideas, accurately diagnosing a number of psychological conditions in patients, understanding why he had difficulty choosing dreams to discuss in the work that follows. Comprehending the therapeutic importance of dreams. So he tells us that, in this option, I would like to explain the word therapeutic. Therapeutic generally means healing of a disease, something that is done to heal a disease. So that option is incorrect. Why? I'll give you a second to think about it. Okay, I'll tell you why. If you thought that dreams have a therapeutic importance, it is incorrect. Because therapy is the solution to the problem. Therapeutic importance meaning dreams have an important part in solving the problem. No, he tells dreams have an important part in understanding the problem, not solving it. Solving it may require other techniques, other things to be considered, but understanding the problems, that is what he tells dreams are about. So option E is incorrect. Option B, as I just stated, he's talking about understanding the problems. Option B, understanding delusional ideas. It is a very strong contender in this question. Let us look at the other options and then we will revert back to B. Accurately diagnosing a number of psychological conditions in patients. Nowhere does he tell he can accurately diagnose the patients. He tells he can provide a way to understand these physically inculcated mental problems. He doesn't tell he will accurately diagnose. Accurately diagnose means if he understands how a person dreams, he will give you exactly what has to be done to solve that person's mental problems. He doesn't tell that. He is talking about understanding the problem, not accurately diagnosing it. Understanding why he had difficulty choosing dreams to discuss in the work that follows. Now, so look at the question and look at the option D. The author argues that understanding the content of dreams is necessary. The answer is option B. Understanding delusional ideas. I will show you where in the passage you will get this answer. See, the dream, line 4 if you read. For when investigated psychologically, the dream proves to be the first link in a chain of abnormal psychic structures. Okay? The dream can lay no claim to a corresponding practical significance. However, its theoretical value is great. And one who cannot explain the origin of content of dreams will strive in vain to understand the problems. So he tells the dreams are the very starting stone, the first reference point from which we can get to understand why a person has certain problems. So question A, the author argues that understanding the content of dreams is necessary. Why? This is a question in which you have to understand the word used in context. So here the word is informs. So let us look at line 24. So let's read from line 20. The surfaces of fracture will be frequently discussed, corresponding to many points of contact where the problem of dream formation informs more comprehensive problems of psychopathology. So in this context, read the sentence, just read the line before it, just sentence. The problem of dream formation informs more comprehensive problems. So, what can we understand from here, from this line? It tells that dream formation informs more comprehensive. So, tells us about more comprehensive problems. So when you try to understand or interpret dreams, you will not only understand psychological problems that a person has, but maybe other various problems which he has not discussed yet. He will elaborate later on in his book. So let us look at the options available. Tells, ignores, solves, influences. So it is pretty obvious. Question 9, which should be the answer. I'll give you a second. Think about it. Based on the way in which the word informs is used in line 24 of the passage, the author is using it to mean what? So question 9, your answer is influences. See here, informs generally means, out of these four options, it means to tell. But you have to understand they are testing whether you can understand the context in which the word or the phrase is used, not what it means. Nobody is going to ask you the meaning of inform at SAT level. They expect you to know. But they are asking you, can you infer what it means in this particular passage? Influences is your answer here. So let us look at that portion of the passage and just see if we replace the word informs with influences, does it make sense? So, which will be frequently discussed, correspond to many points of contact where the problem of dream formation influences more comprehensive problems of psychopathology which cannot be discussed here. So he tells influences makes perfect sense here because you can see that he tells the problems of dream formation influences other problems which are more comprehensive, more bigger, more detailed, and cannot be discussed in an introductory remark. So influences is the correct answer in this case. Question 10, the last question that is there in this passage. Now this question will test, normally in every single passage, the last question talks about or attempts to question you or challenge you on how well you can summarize the passage that you have read. Okay, so this is a question that is related to summarizing and in this case paraphrasing, because in this question, let us look at the question. In the last sentence of the passage, the author attempts to. So you have to understand, you have to read what he read, what he wrote, you have to read what he wrote and then try and explain it, paraphrasing. So summarizing and paraphrasing, generally the last question of a reading test is summarizing, in most cases via paraphrasing. So now let us look at the options. Question 10. Okay. So question 10. First, let us look at the last sentence and then we will try to figure it out on our own before we read any options. That is the best way to do it. I can only express the hope that the reader of this work, putting himself in my difficult position, will show patience, and also that anyone inclined to take offense at any of these reported dreams will concede freedom of thought at least to the dreams. Again, let us go through this sentence. I can only express the hope that the reader of this work, putting himself in my position, will show patience. Meaning what? He is trying to express, he is being defensive, that do not judge me on the dreams that I have written about. Rather, put yourself in my position, show some patience and understanding, and try to understand my point of view of what is being presented here. At any of the reported dreams will concede freedom of thought at least to the dream life. So he tells, I am exposing, basically he wants to tell that he is exposing his dreams. So he has the freedom of dreaming about whatever he wants. So do not judge him based on that. Actions and dreams are two different things. So he wants to make sure that there is a difference between something that's theoretical and something that's practical, which is the main theme of this passage as we saw in one of the earlier questions. So your options are, encourages the reader to read the work of a variety of psychologists. Okay. Option B, to inspire the reader to conduct his or her own scientific experiment. Option C, to get the reader to empathize with him. Option D, explain why he made certain redactions to the dreams he later discusses. So, I'm going to give you a second before I tell you which is the right answer and try to figure out the answer yourself. I've made you read the last passage, the last sentence. What can you infer from that? Summarizing what you have read all this while with the questions that you have answered. Summarize everything. Okay, now I will present the answer to you. The answer to this question is option C. Get the reader to empathize with him. What is empathize? What does the word empathize means? When you relate to a person and excuse me. So when you relate to a person and you understand what that person is going through, not sympathize, not feel sorry for the person if somebody is going through a difficult time. No, you understand and you feel what that person is feeling. That is empathizing. So get the reader to empathize with him. Why have we selected this as the answer? Because he tells us that to concede freedom of thought, at least in the dream world. So he tells, try and understand from where I am coming. This is not a practical way of thinking, or maybe this may not be the way I live life practically. So please understand that this is a dream. And we have seen from the previous question that he is a defensive person. He is not someone who wants to write about what is going on in his head. He tells that is the job, the emotions that he goes through. Those are people who do that are authors and poets who express their emotions through words. But he is an investigator of nature. So he is a scientist in a way. So he does not want to express his psychic intimacies, his mental intimate thoughts to the world. So that is why he is defensive. So he is pleading people, since he is a defensive person, he does not know whether people will look at his dreams in a way and judge him, or will they not judge him, or how will they judge him? Will they look at him as an aggressive person? Will they look at him as a mad person? So he tells, don't judge. Try to understand, empathize. He is trying to get the empathy. Be patient, read through the entire thing and then make a judgment. Don't make any split judgments. Okay, and he tells people to show patience and understanding. All these words are synonymous with empathizing with someone. So he wants the reader of this publication to not read it exactly in a, not read it just on the basis of what is presented on the sheet, but to get the in-depth meaning of what is presented on the sheet and to understand it and to empathize with the subject. So we have completed this passage of reading, passage 1, which was the passage from the interpretation of dreams by Sigmund Freud, which was written in 1913, and these were the introductory remarks. I hope you have understood exactly why we have selected every single answer, what was the proof that we had to select the answers, what type of questions you will be facing in your SAT exams, and how to approach said questions. Thank you. Have a nice day.